When we were more in touch with our natural evolution and natural relationship with the earth, we were in direct contact with fairies all the time. But now they've kind of retreated and gone back into the inner worlds because of the way that we have neglected our responsibility to take care of the outer world. That's humans' job, is nurturing and protecting the outer world, and fairies are the inner world. So we're like a counterpart of each other. But yeah, I think that right now, in this time, and also I don't know if you guys were at Dr. Bones' workshop last night, but it was really good. That was cool. Yeah, it was very interesting and really cool, but he was mentioning how in these next 2 years we're having a lot of planets in retrograde and just these really interesting numerological phenomena and different, it's just this huge transition period, and a lot of it is going to happen through chaos and through because it's that regeneration cycle, so things are going to kind of seem maybe out of control a bit, but that's a necessary process to the regeneration. And fairies are coming to realize that, there's definitely some of them that are still angry and upset and very personally hurt that from the way humans have come to create this society that doesn't really value the earth that we live on. But they're coming to realize that it's an illness, and so they're starting to leave these little clues here and there for us to really, they're not going to come to you, unless you really build up a relationship with some certain entities or beings of the Fae. It's not going to always be very direct contact like it is with other spiritual embodiments or beings, because that's not how they work. They're ephemeral and they're always in flux and shape-shifting, and so the whole point is that they're gonna try and open these doorways for us, leave clues and leave ways for us to reconnect, but it's something that we have to do on our own. They're trying to help us, but it's not going to be directly because that in their mind is not productive. You can't control anyone else, certainly, and so there's no way that they would, and that's dangerous for their existence too, to try and be so concrete and solid in a presentation, because that's not how they exist at all. They're energetic beings that don't have these concrete boundaries. So if you're trying to kind of come more in contact with that realm, it's really important to connect to really subtle things and small things that actually, once you connect to it, it's not a small thing. It feels so significant, but the whole point is that because they're always here, they're our counterparts, and they're just right on the other side of the wall, and so it's not, kind of like Dr. Bones was saying, it's always here in our existence, in our reality all the time. So it's our job to make the effort, and they want to form that reconnection because we're a part of each other. It's super important to have that relationship. But yeah, so I will just take a pause here to let you guys maybe tell your any sort of experiences or thoughts or anything like that you have had with this realm of energy and beings. Yeah.
Well, my name's Kayla, and I don't really have any experience with it. It's just something I've been hearing about and I'm curious to learn about.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's good. Super good. Well, you're here, so.
Yeah. I've been told to ask the fairies sometimes for help with things or removing blocks, and so I've kind of done that, but not really anything I've really experienced.
They are little helpers, they are. how about yourself?
My name is Cynthia, and I haven't had any experience either, but I'm certainly looking to cultivate that. But I would say that what I'm really attracted to is people that have had contact and sort of just there's something about the way that they come across that's really attractive. There's just like have a little glint in their eye, or I'm not really sure how to explain it, but it's definitely like they've been touched by that world. And like you were saying, when you're talking about animal spirits, they're very easy to connect with. You know, especially if you're spend some time in nature, then you're going to be able to connect with your plant allies, you know, pretty easily with just some meditation, you know, just really going deep. But I feel like this other realm is something that I don't really have any experience, but it just seems super awesome. And so I was like pretty excited when I saw that you were giving this talk. So that's why I came.
Yeah, there's like kind of a lot of different directions I can go in this topic, but so I kind of just want to talk first maybe a little bit about like the history of these beings and like cultural history and that sort of thing, and then we can kind of go towards the relationship with fungi specifically. So a lot of like the word fairy itself, the root of that word is from ancient Celtic traditions. It's a Gaelic word, and so that's where like that kind of concept of the fae arose from, like in that terminology, from ancient Ireland, Scotland, England, that area. But you don't want to limit yourself to just like that word. I mean, the word is like very broadly encompassing, but a lot of the context that we think of is like, you know, just these little beings with wings, and it's much more than that. And there are certainly accounts of fae folk like all around the world. It's just under different names and different languages and this sort of thing. But there are, like she was saying, she grew up in Brunswick, Georgia, which is kind of has this legend there for having a thin veil. And so there's a lot of places around the world that are attributed to having this thin veil. And, you know, you can open, if you know, really delve into the practice and do meditation and connect and all of these things, you can establish doorways and portals yourself with your fairy allies. But there are also places that are sacred to the fairies where if you go there, it's a really great tool to be able to kind of connect to that world, because the boundaries are not, some places the boundaries are not even there, and in those locations you need to be very careful, because if you enter into it without, you know, some good knowledge and intention, you very well could, like, and there's many historical accounts of people, you know, walking along somewhere that they thought they knew, and then like one step to the next, they're suddenly completely lost for years and years, and like will walk out of the woods years later and their family is like, you know, so it's like you need to be wary of that, because it's as I was saying earlier, fairies are not like they're not in the physical realm so much. They can take forms in the physical realm, but that's not their natural existence. So and that also goes for like the realms in which they exist. It's, if you step into it without, it can be dangerous. You need to just have that in mind, that it's an area that you want to approach with respect and knowledge. And you know, usually if you have a good heart and good intentions and you make a mistake, it's seen as such. But also there is this nature of hurt and anger that has been historically established for a really long time, that fairies are not so sure about why humans are making these choices and take it very personally and that sort of thing. So you always, when trying to reestablish this relationship, you want to hold that in your heart, that that we have really, really hurt them in a way that's like, I had like a really interesting morning this morning. Like, I had a really bad migraine and I'm feeling way better now, but it puts me in like a super vulnerable state because it's like, so, but it's, so emotions are gonna come out, but it's necessary for this workshop because I have to be vulnerable to help reestablish this connection. So, yes, historically, we attribute a lot of you can find a lot of writing on the fairies coming into the outer realms through these portals in like the UK, but you can find it in other parts of the world as well. It's just sometimes a little harder to access that writing and that knowledge because for whatever reason the people in the UK really, really connected to those beings and formed deep relationships with them. And so, and that's my heritage too, is I'm Irish and Scottish, like pretty much exclusively. So I think that I connect very much to that bloodline and that relationship there. But I think that it's also very important to, in this kind of work, connect to your blood and your history of your genetics. I mean, certainly connecting to the land you're on and that sort of thing as well, but your blood and your genetics is, you know, this very complex coding of your physical history, and in that coding, I mean, you know, in science we say there's like 98% junk DNA, 96% something like that junk DNA, right? Like we just call it that because we don't have an explanation for what it actually does. But it's clearly been inherited for thousands and thousands of years, and that in evolution, biology, evolutionary like strategy, nothing is conserved unless it has a purpose. Usually there's like some, you know, weird things like the appendix, but even now we're like are finding out that the appendix probably has a purpose, and you know, all these things. So like if they're there for you. And that coding has in your genetic coding has very strong spiritual elements that you can draw on to connect to your history as a human, and connect back to your ancestors who lived in a time when these worlds were not so separated from each other. And fairies also don't really exist in the same time dimensions as we do, so you know, it's and their like life cycle is not really such a clear like birth death kind of a thing, so you could very, very likely interact with someone or some being that your, you know, great-great-grandpa also interacted with, or even like your like ancient ancestors, you know. So I connect a lot with the Celtic side of things because that's my heritage, and there is a race of people in ancient Ireland and Scotland called the Tuatha De Danann, and those are known as the fairy race. And this is actually something that has been genetically tracked. We see this like lineage of the Tuatha De Danann coming out of that area of the world just like suddenly, because there is interbreeding with humans and fairies historically. It's not really a thing that happens so much now, but yeah, in the genetic data we see this like sudden these sudden characteristics coming at that time period, where the legends also are saying that the Tuatha De Danann, I don't know, there's all sorts of really interesting legends about it. There's stories of them, you know, coming down on these like cloud ships, and then also coming out of the hills and things like this. So it's like a interdimensional like entrance, and we find, you know, anthropological or genetic kind of evidence that of that lineage that we don't have anything else in the world that is similar to it. So it's like a weird phenomena there. And so yeah, I know the history of the Celtic fairy interaction like most strongly. And I think that it's a significant thing that the fairies chose to come interbreed with humans. And so we see that, as I was saying, we're counterparts of each other, but we see that it's like even more than that. It's not just like, you do this job and I do this job. It's this really deep spiritual relationships. Like there's love stories between humans and fairies, and certainly like other darker stories as well of like children being kidnapped and replaced with changelings and things like this. But there is like this really deep interaction of like almost a desire to preserve the race as well. But it's in that time period they were, they viewed humans also as these like holy beings and were completely open to interbreeding and even like wanting to have human children. And so this brings us into like another kind of understanding that we need to come to terms with the way fairies exist and function, because there are these dark stories and these pretty scary encounters. There's really positive encounters, really healing interactions, and like fairies being like these amazing little helpers and stuff. But there's also the complete opposite of it, of like really terrible like kidnappings and things like this. So this is something that we need to really connect with when we're trying to understand like who these beings are. Fairies they're not light beings, they're not shadow beings. They are directly in the center, and that's pretty much completely governing of all of their characteristics and behaviors. They do not see light as good, shadow as bad, or anything like that. They're in the center, and this is reflective of nature itself. It just is, like these, and all, natural disasters happen, great crops are produced, and like it just is, it's nature. And so and a lot of it can be also attributed to the church trying to bring about negative connotations with fairies, and just like other religions trying to gain control and that sort of thing. But we might see a behavior of a fairy seeming to be like malicious or evil or something like that, and it's not, and the fairy does not see it like that because they don't have these concepts of evil. So it's something that we really need to keep in mind when we're working with them. And it's not, it doesn't mean that you should be scared off by it at all. It's just the way that they exist. And I think that as humans we can really, really learn from that, because things are not black and white ever. And sometimes we have to make choices in our lives that seem so bad, or so, it's like choices where it seems like any choice is a bad choice, something like that. But trying to step back from it and just seeing it as the nature of what is in that moment is really helpful and really powerful, because reality is perfect, and our consciousness is in this form is not necessarily infinite, like in this contained physical form of a physical brain. We can't step back and see the infinity of things, but the infinity is perfect. And so even if you're stuck in this physical moment that seems just very negative or whatever, you can't like move past it, and you're like, why am I experiencing this? It's serving a purpose of nature, and it just is, and it's perfect. So I think that's a really helpful thing, and that also connects to the fact that fairies are not physical beings, so they're able to very much easier step back and like kind of, you know, like not be so boxed in, and be able to see how things are in the flow. Everything's like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, there's like some, I don't know, YouTube videos that try and show like the different dimensions, like using different images. There's one that I really like about time, and it's like, it shows our perception of time, and it's just, you know, like you standing here. But really, like, the way time works is like everything is in a continuum. So like if you were able to view it, like we are able to view any, you know, like traveling a distance or something like that, you would see that like it's not just you standing here. It's like all your past connected and all your future connected. It's a continuum. And so I think that that's also a strong lesson of being a energetic being, is that everything is a continuum. You don't have such like cut off boundaries. Yes, so it's just things like this when we're trying to connect to the spirit of the Fae, that we need to put the time in to understand like their reality and existence, because that's how we're going to be most productive with them, and not run into situations where and it's not always the human's fault either, because it comes from the other side of things. It's like fairies are viewing humans from a point of like not being a human and not understanding always how we function. So right now is a really important time of rebuilding this relationship with the Fae world, because they retreated to the inner worlds and kind of cut off a lot of ties. But now they're coming to realize that that's, you know, they thought that that was going to save themselves and nature by cutting off from humans who are making these really bad decisions and stuff. But that clearly didn't work. The world is in very bad state right now. So many fairies are coming to realize that we need to reestablish this connection, and they are reaching out right now. It's like a really significant time for rebuilding this connection. And the other thing is that being an energetic being, it's all about more of an approach of feeling. Like everything is about feeling. So, you know, their relationship with, I think you guys have not quite gotten here yet, but we were saying like, you know, if you take a mushroom right here, and we're viewing it with love and everything, but we kind of have this physical separation from it. In a sense, I mean, we have energetic interactions with that mushroom too, or whatever. But like, if a fairy is viewing that mushroom that it loves so much, it's like there is no boundary between the mushroom spirit and the fairy spirit. Like they are just, it's like, you know, the growing tips of the mycelium coming together, you know. It's like that fusing of different in mycelium, it's like, you know, genetic kind of differences or whatever, energetic differences. But yeah, it's literally a physical fusing. So everything in which the state in which fairies exist is a constant state of passion and love and just like pure feels, you know, like and that's also why they're so playful, and that's also a characteristic you need to really connect with when you're starting to interact with them, is they just like, it's all about the playfulness and being joyous about your existing at all, and not even just existing as an individual, but like existing with everything around you. And so it's really, you know, like it's all a game, like it's all interaction. Like you do one thing, you get this kind of feedback, you do another thing, you get this kind of feedback, and it's like testing, you know, it's all a game. You are finding out new things all the time, at the same time, like, that game playfulness is like also synonymous with mischief, and so that's like just something you have to realize. That's how they work. It's all about the mischief, and it's so much fun, but you also, like, you know, humans are not always in that mindset, you know. So you like might be like, let's get down to business, but it's not quite like, that's not going to happen. You're not going to ever just get down to business when you're working with fairies. You have to have this like playful interaction and this like kind of feedback, like, because that's making you connect to the experience in a way that's, you know, like, getting down to business can feel efficient and be productive, but is that really like the end goal? Like, isn't the experience the goal and what you learn from it? So if you go into a situation with a fairy where you're like, okay, I need this done, I will give you this, and I want this back, like, that could be really offensive to them. So you have to be careful with that. Like, yeah, approach them, you know, like, it's really great to come in contact with you. You know, if it's your first time, then that's totally cool to let them know too. Like, this is a really new experience for me. I'm very excited about it, very nervous. Like, have that, you know, that like feedback interaction going on, and let your feels flow. So yeah, just like really making the effort to understand how they function, and they will do the same for you. And at the same time, there are some fairy beings that you might not want to interact with, like, maybe at all, depending on how it goes. Like, in the Celtic tradition, there's two courts of fairies, known as the Seelie Court and the Unseelie Court. And this is also common in lots of other cultures, but I don't have the terminology for it. But it's, yeah, these Seelie is friendly and very open, and Unseelie is more, they're not really so concerned with like interaction with necessarily like they're not necessarily concerned with rebuilding relationships or interaction with humans or interaction with some other beings. They're more like driven by what they are and what their purpose is and nothing else. And so that's can be like potentially very dangerous, because if you are they will do whatever it takes to fulfill their purpose, and you might not be a part of that, or you know, you might approach them for help, and the way they see it is that if they can use that presentation that you are giving to them to their advantage, and they're not caring really very much about the other side of it. They're trying to fulfill their purpose. So there's a dark side to it too, and it doesn't mean that it's negative. Like, it's just how it is. It's the nature of it. It's like you're not gonna go like jump into, you know, like if it's your first time surfing, you're not gonna jump into an area where there's like 10-foot waves or something like that. That's the nature of the wave. The wave like crashes and has undertow, and that's what it is. And so you have to respect it for what it is. And it's a clear, well, there's different kinds of quartz obviously, but quartz is like kind of almost like universal, mm-hmm. right? Like same, yeah. So really kind of like gifts that are like this to start first building that relationship. Quartz is great. Honey is a really lovely thing too. They love honey. And then just like even they definitely, fairy altars are very effective as well. So like creating a space that's specifically for them, and you can you can make things like nature mandalas and stuff like that in that space, but it's usually more effective if you're actually like cultivating something there rather than like picking it and putting it there. So like planting something for them, or you know, giving them a nice like spawn block or something like that. So sort of yeah, something that's has like more to it than just like that one in that moment, like that's something that they can, a lot of fairy altars, like growing things there and stuff is really effective because it allows that plant spirit or mushroom spirit or whatever to be there for, so that the fairy can like come in and go out and come in, and that's like how they like to be, very ephemeral. So like having something there that's like, you know, a life source that's in constant, like that's going through a life cycle is makes it a safe space for them. So yeah, definitely offerings are really good, and pretty much any time that you're trying to interact with fairies, they would like to have some sort of offering. They like blood a lot, hair, that kind of things too. They have a fascination with humans, very fascinated. Like, even though we've destroyed a lot of our like good relations with them, they're still like so fascinated by our like very physical nature. And so yeah, blood is really effective. But you know, you don't have to do that. It's like, that's kind of, it's a lot. It's like, you know, your personal life, it's your blood. So you don't have to give yourself that in that way. But I don't know, I am 100% like in my relationship with them willing to like give any part of my physical self, because I don't, my identity is a fairy, and you will encounter fairies that are in human form as well, and it's like part of this curtain of they're like, I don't know, a way that they're trying to present themselves in like not such a direct manner, but still trying to like reestablish this relationship. And so I am way more connected to my like energetic bodies, my astral bodies and stuff, and so I'm totally good with like my physical being, like being a tool for fairies. But you certainly don't have to do that. And then like, yeah, you will get to, they will be pretty like specific about requests once you build a relationship with them of what they want. And it also depending on what the work you are doing with them, like certain herbs or certain crystals, this kind of thing, that have, you know, particular energies about them and that work really well in different situations. Like it's kind of similar to like a, I don't know, Wicca, witchcraft kind of approach, or even like herbalism, that sort of thing, that like all these plants have their own personalities and purposes and all of this. So like you can use that in creating these, I mean, I see them as like creating spells with the fairies, but it's however you want to view it. It's your craft, basically. It's crafting this relationship and this like intention. So then as you're like, depending on what you're trying to do, you know, you will like get more information on what kind of offerings they would like. Yeah, and they really love having like a fairy garden or something like that. That's like ideal. That's, if you want to start building those allies, build a little fairy garden, and that's like
I will say that I did have these outdoor plants that when I moved to this terrace, and they were like really sad, and I was like, oh, maybe I should just like uproot the plants and like start over, because they were like so dead, and I was like, nothing's gonna come back. And I did have some like mycelium that I was gonna toss out because it was totally spent, and I was like, well, I'm just gonna like put it in there and I'm just gonna see like what happens. And literally like 2 weeks later, like that whole planter like came back to life. I like have no idea, because it was like, I live in Spain and it's super super hot there, and it's like there's no way these plants are gonna come back. And like I don't know, somehow they did. And I was just like, maybe, yeah, I was like, oh, so maybe it was like, I mean, because I certainly got that thought from somewhere else. Like, it just kind of like came to me. I was like, oh, well, I'm just going to try that and see what happens. So,
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that too. I think that's like a big part of it is like this little element of surprise, and I think that's like also incorporated with the mischievousness. It's like you don't know what to expect, like,
yeah.
and like that's a really great part about like life is can be like a little overwhelming sometimes, but that's how you learn, right? And, yeah, and I don't know, any more like pausing thoughts right here?
Yeah, how would you navigate not wanting to come in contact with like sort of not friendly fairies?
Yeah, I think like it's not so like if you're a person who respects nature, spends the time, takes the time to really get to know nature, and also like spiritual encounters and stuff like that, you start to develop like an intuition of like how to read spirits, how to like feel it, how to, you know what I mean, like it's intuitive. So I would say that unseelie beings are definitely like more secluded and hidden, and like you are gonna, when you start reaching out, it's much less likely that you're going to encounter a more unfriendly, and I don't even know if unfriendly is the right word, but like it's less likely because the Seelie side of beings are kind of wanting to establish this relationship a little bit more so, and like I mean even like the Seelie and the unseelie like are often like separated from each other. They love each other because they're all a part of each other, but they're not there's like a clear separation, so it's less likely that you're going to come in contact with them. If you do, like, it's really, really about your intuition, and you're going to feel it quite quickly that this being is like maybe a little more than you are ready to handle, or and if you are in that space where you're encountering an unseelie being, then it doesn't mean that, you know, you can be there with them and acknowledge them, and that can be it. You can be like, oh, I came into this space, you're here, I respect you, like, and this is me, like, we have this clear separation, right? Like, you don't need to engage in anything else. Like, they are not, it's not like they're, you know, just waiting there for you to come and like they'll entrap you. It's not, it's most likely not going to be like that. And so if you somehow come in contact with them, it's probably also like a bit of a surprise for them too, because they're pretty like reclusive and just like not really interacting and outside of their selves that much. So it's probably like, you know, not something that they necessarily planned either, most likely. So yeah, you can just establish, like, acknowledge and respect, and that's enough. And then you can say, you know, like, okay, I'm going back into my space, and leave, and that's it. And that can be a very learning interaction, because then you know that they are there and you have felt them, and that just like brings you to a deeper understanding. But you know, if it, like, there's always instances in all sorts of spiritual work where you like might just, you know, something might happen that is not what you planned, or what you not what your intention was. It might be scary. That's like all types of spiritual work has that, you know. And then, but that encounter might serve a very strong purpose. Like, even if it, like, you know, if you might like go into a state of depression or get really sick or something like that, like, like get all your money stolen or something like that. Like that is a period of like, then you're gonna hopefully connect to why it happened and like try and like delve into that, and then work from there. Like, oh, maybe it was because I insulted this being and I did not mean to, and you can call upon, like other allies to help reestablish like boundaries and that sort of a thing. But I don't think, like, it's something that you need to be aware of and like understands that those existences are there, but I don't think that it's any indication or reason for any sort of fear at all. Like, we are equally as powerful as fairies. Like, we are counterparts of each other. So I don't think that it's like, it's just the element of like respect, and that's really the strongest part of it. I don't think that there needs to be any fear whatsoever associated with it. Just like trying to learn as much as possible and establish your knowledge. Because there are like other things, like if you so happen, Dr. Bones was talking about that last night, he accidentally stepped into a fairy realm and kind of like, well, he had good interactions, he was like having conversations with them, but his impression was like if he ran out of water, he was going to be stuck there forever, which like is totally a valid thing, and that's like completely intuitive too. Like, you will have these things, but there are certain things, like if you walk into the fairy realms, you really are not supposed to eat anything there, because then you're internalizing like their magic, and they're not so willing to let that just like go back into the world and run rampant, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's just very respect at every part of it, but also like, connecting to your intuition and always having them protecting yourself always first. But but they're related to us, they're part of us too, so there's not very much malicious intent or anything like that. Does that answer your question?
Can I ask you one more question?
Oh, yeah.
I know this is going to sound really silly, but in any of your encounters, have you ever had them mention anything about like when they show up in pop culture? So like, I think it's like shadow hunters or something, there's like the Seelie realm, and it's like this whole subset that they have on a particular character in the Seelie realm, and it's like part of the whole like storyline. And I've heard like they pop up in other pop culture, and I'm just wondering if they think it's like funny because they're kind of playful, or are they kind of like, oh, that's not cool, or I don't know if they've ever heard them mention anything.
Fairies have a really interesting relationship with like human culture. It's because they are shapeshifters and like ephemeral in nature, so like they love presenting themselves in a way that it like speaks to us, like really, like, and it changes all the time because we're culturally changing all the time. So they love to be there in these like ways of they change, they like, their appearance and their nature and everything is, they're always tweaking it to how they think they're gonna really affect us the most strongly. So they love having a presence in our culture, very much so. And it's like, it's been there for so long, like so long. It's fairy tales, like, exactly. That's what you grow up learning about. And I think that's definitely one of the ways that they're like leaving these little like breadcrumb trail for us to like follow it back to them. They're not, they're not like having, they're not like having that much, I can't think of an example. It's not like super direct, but it's like these like mysterious stories that have been passed down for hundreds of years that you learn as a child, and like that's implanted in your psychology. Like those are the first like stories that you're connecting with, and So it's kind of, yeah, just like that, the nature of them like being right there on the other side of it energetically all the time. So and there's the whole concept of the diminutive fairies, which is like has been historically a big representation of them, these like little tiny beings with wings. And like I think that a lot of that origin of the diminutive fairies did come from the church, like trying to kind of make their power seem less and make them seem just like more of little, I don't know, imaginative beings or something like that. Like but then they're like, oh, okay, that's what you want us to be? Like, cool, we can do that, like, without a problem, and totally still have this very powerful effect. Like, so it's like, I think they really love playing around with that. Like, Dr. Bones was saying yesterday, too, that I don't know, I just, like, find it, he's a wizard, and fairies have, like, a big fascination with wizards. So it was just really interesting to me to hear his interpretations of things. He talked about how a lot of the, like, alien encounters historically are actually, like, probably the same beings as fairies. So, like, they do that, too. They present themselves as, like, whatever you're gonna like really listen to. Like if you were, you know, like if there's a bunch of UFO stuff going around, like they can totally just conjure up a UFO and kind of come like jolt your consciousness real quick or something like that, you know. So I think that's like something they like to play around with a lot.
Oh, that's like so. I mean, I know you mentioned the gardens and the honey that they like. Are there, like, how do you reach out to them? What are some
Yeah, totally. So I'm gonna show you guys a really powerful meditation that this is like, okay, so this is something that's happening a lot in our world right now, that historically there's like this occultist kind of knowledge that you really had to go through historically, like serious initiation processes to be able to access. And now it's changing because our consciousness is changing, and we don't have that tradition very much. In some cultures it's definitely still there, but we don't have that kind of like, you know, growing up initiation tradition as much anymore. And we have the internet, so knowledge is coming to us in a very different way. And so like historically you might not ever encounter this symbol because it is like an initiate knowledge, but now it's let me find it real quick. There's a lot of different ways that you can start to establish that connection, but this is a very, very powerful meditation, and gosh darn it, find it for you. And something that I am feeling the call to bring exposure to for the people who are seeking it out, and you guys are here at my workshop, so I would say that that's appropriate if I can ever find it. It's called the Spiral of the She. The She is also another Gaelic word for fairy. Oh my gosh. Oh, So we've got this spiral right here.
It's also used in Reiki.
Yeah, it like appears in some really interesting ways, like overlap, you know. So this is a portal right here, and this is something that's really powerful to incorporate into fairy altars and meditation, and it also like really appears in nature a lot. The other week I did like a pretty powerful meditation with this. It was like triggered by that frill right there. The really powerful meditation that I had. She's Fury Fairy. But then like a week later, we were hiking out, and I took a class with her in Highlands, North Carolina. It's like this sweet fungal taxonomy course, but we were hiking out on one of the trails they had there, and I found a turkey tail that was like perfectly spiraled like this.
That was the only turkey tail we found the whole time.
Yeah, the only one the whole like 2 weeks we were there, and it was like perfectly spiraled. Like it was so crazy. So now that's on my fairy altar. Yeah, it's very powerful, but you can use in the meditation. You can it's powerful to draw it or trace it, like either with your hand or your mind's eye, like whatever feels most effective to you, and just like really like you know, like there's when you do different meditation techniques, it's like putting your focus into something so that's like clearing your mind and all of this, but like really focusing on nothing else but creating that image and like making it really strong. You can like, you know, paint it or whatever you feel is most effective, and then start with it as simple, like start with it as a one-dimensional thing, simple image. And then once you've like really charged it and concentrated on it as one dimension, then you can start to visualize it as becoming multi-dimensional and like actually like becoming a tunnel. And for me, like what often happens is this middle line right here, it becomes a door handle. So that's like your choice to open the door there. So you were, you know, connecting to that bridge, that portal, whatever you want to call it, but then you're consciously making the choice to open the door. And you can either go in or you can call things out, either way. I think that, I mean, and it's all intuitive based, but for me, it's, I'm way more at a stage right now of going in because I'm trying to learn more and like meet more beings there, and I don't feel that I have like the authority to call anyone out, you know? So, and I mean, there are some really safe beings that you can call out to. There's the name Seraphina is a really, really good, like, motherly fairy goddess. May, M-A-E.
Know a girl, sorry, this is
No,
like
you're
just an
good.
introduction, but I actually know a girl from my college who I like suspected maybe was like a human manifestation of like a fairy, and her name is actually May.
Really?
Yeah. She's like half Scottish and like half Roma.
Whoa.
So like she kind of
That's her bloodline.
in on all of that. Like
That is really cool that her name is May. Yeah, May, the like spirit of May, I have never like, if you Google it, you don't really find much for like the fairy May, but May like has presented herself in like really powerful ways. She's like one of the main like first contacts that I've ever had, and she's like, she can be pretty fiery, but she's really healing. It's like healing fire, you know. Yeah, she like really reminds me of fire cider for some reason.
I just said this in my mind. I was thinking fire cider.
Really?
It's so weird.
That is so weird.
I was thinking Mae West and fire cider. But
Yeah.
I was like,
That's like really what she feels like for some reason. Like, that's so great. And then another really powerful being is Breed, Saint Bridget. She's like one of the really strongest examples of the Tuatha De Danann. She was like royalty for them, but she was so well respected and worshipped that like the Catholic Church, they couldn't get rid of her, and she became Saint Bridget. And so those are like some really good matriarch kind of beings that are really good for this kind of like nurturing like relationship of trying to nurture the like initiation process kind of. They're super protective, like they're kind of like in this position of like, you know, you really feel them like above you, and like they deserve so much respect and honor, but like you really feel that they are like, they're so mommy, like they have a lot of patience, and like I don't know, like, you know, Bridget's also like associated with a lot of things like war and stuff like that, but it's still like, it's somehow still this really nurturing energy. It's like this like mama kind of protection, and so and moms are so understanding and like forgiving and nurturing, and I think that those matriarchs are like really helpful for getting into this connection, because they're so powerful that they're not gonna let anything bad happen to you. Do you guys want to like take a little moment to say anything about your relationship with fairies or your interest or anything like that? You certainly don't have to, but
Can you do angels instead of fairies?
we can talk about some angels, certainly. Certainly. They're definitely intertwined. So
This is the fairy expert.
Yeah, she's the fairy. She's my fairy queen.
I want to hear you.
well, I also want to hear what you have to say.
Your poetry, your fairy poetry, for example.
Yes, yes.
Very nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I've been really actually wanting to connect to, because I'm a fairy, and this is like something that I have been connected to strongly in my life, throughout my life, but it's also, I don't encounter tons of human forms that are like can be teachers in this field, you know what I mean? So it's really nice to have you here. Super grateful. So I don't know, we were just talking about kind of some ways to initiate the connection, and like some meditations and that sort of thing. We went over a little bit of like offerings and fairy gardens, and yes, just like some particular beings that I have connected with, some like fairy queens who I think are good like matriarchal facilitators for bringing this connection. Serafina and May and Bridget are some really good beings that I think are really good also for just like being new to this realm. I mean, they're like high queens, but they're also they have like a nurturing aspect, and they're more traditionally, you know, connected to from humans, so it's not necessarily, not quite as unpredictable maybe as like a sylph or something like that. So yeah, that's where we were at. And just going through all that. And that's, well, speaking of sylphs, I guess that's something else I should mention too, just like in coming to know fairy beings, is there's these elemental fairies as well that are just more embodiments of like different elemental characters, and those guys are really powerful and amazing, and I love them dearly, but they're also maybe a little more unpredictable because they're just a little more raw maybe, like they don't necessarily have like a psychology aspect, they're elemental. So and there's those beings for all of the elements that you may encounter, and a lot of them, like for example, the a lot of like encounters with sirens, you know, in the ocean are those beings, and you hear lots of scary stories about sirens, so just be wary. But you know, that's who they are, so as long as you understand that's who they are and you know how to protect yourself, you can still have good encounters with them. Yes. And I think like now I have not been keeping track of time, but I would like to move into a little bit more with the fungi focus of fairies. Because yeah, I just kind of previously have been giving an introduction to fairy realm. Do you know this symbol here?
Oh yes.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I was just talking about that too. Also, if you guys take the time, you can look into the septogram, which is this septogram came about like a little more recently in human history relationship with fairies, but I think it's very powerful, and it's like you know, kind of like rooted in the pentagram, but it also is incorporating other directional elements of, actually I think I have a since the fairies are kind of part of the inner world, but transitional, they can transition between the worlds, so this is incorporating more of the more aspects than the pentagram is. Yeah, just kind of like incorporating that energetic existence that's can travel between these boundaries. But I'm not going to go super deep into that because that's kind of like a personal journey, I think. It's a really powerful symbol. Okay. So, with mushrooms and fungi specifically, well, clearly we have tons of, like, you always see images of fairies sitting on mushrooms, toadstools, like this sort of thing. That's just something that is historically associated together, so much so. So why is that? And like all plants too, flowers and trees, like you see that association there, but we're here for the fungi right now. So, and I think that that's also kind of, as the field of mycology is becoming more and more widespread, and it's like very much of a grassroots movement, and it's like we're realizing that the fungi are actually, like, you know, pretty much our ancestors and like a deep part of us ourselves. I think that it perfectly goes along with reestablishing the connection to the fairy realms as well, because the fairies are a part of us as well. So it's like, I mean, this is happening in a lot of different fields, but like, or reconnecting to the natural elements, but I think that we can use the fungi to facilitate this connection with fairies, because fairies love fungi dearly, and they have the way fungi kind of presents themselves, and they're also very ephemeral, and they pop up here and there and here, and you have to connect to, when you know, first like start getting into foraging or something like that, like so often if you are, you walk through the forest and you don't see any fungi if your eye is not trained to it. But once you start like forming that connection, then you start to see them everywhere, like all over the place, like ridiculously. And so I think that it's like that breadcrumb trail. It's like, oh, you found this one, okay, there's one right here actually, and there's one right here, and one right here, one right here. And it's like, so I think that that nature of presentation is really, once you start to train your eye and train your intuition, it's up to you to do the training, but all the doorways are right there. Physically, like as foraging and like finding abundance and like finding all these food sources and medicine in nature and like facilitating this healing and stuff, but also like in a more like energetic way of all of the psychoactive components that are also doorways, and kind of it's like that, the spiral there. It's open that portal that you can connect to and look down, but it's up to you to open the door and go in. And I also think that, well, I know that fungi are representative of shadow work, and you use them, and they're really, not to say that you can't do light work with them, but I think that they're more naturally inclined to helping us with shadow work. And that's also a parallel that we find with the fairies, is this, like, it's not all light. And actually you like really, it's kind of this interesting sometimes like apprehension there, even with people who are like, you know, completely aware of either the fairy realm or like the psychedelic aspects. There's still like some sort of apprehension. You encounter like, you know, a lot of witches who are like, I will never touch fairy work because it's too unpredictable, and it's not light or dark, right? It's just right there in the middle. So there's like definitely some people who don't even want to delve into it, and that's totally cool. Like, but I think that it's such a powerful realm, and it's like really much more true to what actually nature is, because I think that that's a big problem in our world in general, is that we have not done our shadow work at all, and so the shadows are controlling everything, and we are suppressing it, like, no, that's not there, but like, by doing that, you are completely cutting off like a true part of yourself that is like who you are, and yeah, that's when the shadows start to control you. So I think that these fungi and fairies are allies for us to realize that shadows are not negative. It's not a negative thing. Like, even so like an example of your shadows is, you know, just like being embarrassed about something, you know, in a social setting, or having like feelings of jealousy or possessiveness or something like this, right? So like those may be like characteristics that are negatively connotated, but it's only negative if you think of it like that, and like you can actually use those as extremely powerful tools. So yeah, like experiencing that jealousy, like and connecting to it, and or whatever it is, like connecting to the experience of it, and then but not letting it control your behavior. And I think that that's something we really need to do more so. I find like it's something really interesting. I find this a lot in like romantic kind of relationship settings, that the shadow work is really, I don't know, because like, here in this setting, I think most of us are pretty like trying to not hide parts of ourselves, but in a lot of the outside world, we see like the way people view romantic relationships as like super idealistic, and this like ultimate goal of like, I don't know, living in this society or something, and like that it's also like very in these confined boxes, and so I think that then fairies, like in their romances, are way different than humans, and it can they experience tons of love, like it's all about passion and love, but it's also not about like boundaries and restrictions and rules, and like so and I think like all of these, like the emotional aspect of it is super unpredictable, and like, I mean, they're emotions, so they don't follow logic, and that is often, you know, like in a lot of relationships, people are trying to suppress these feelings of like either like jealousy and or whatever, that side of it, or like feelings of wanting to be, you know, like being attracted to other people outside of their relationship. Or this is just like, you know, one example of how using the shadow work can come into play. But I think that like not suppressing those natural instincts, because they're natural, and like bringing it into an open space and like having this open discussion, because yeah, it's, you hear so many stories of like humans falling in love with fairies, and then just like it's maybe seems to be like the fairies are using the humans or something like that. But it's like, again, it's coming to understand how the fairies work. It's not really malicious intent. That's just like the way that fairies experience love. It's not about possessiveness. It's about feeling in that moment, feeling the feels. And so I think, yeah, bringing anything with like supposed negative connotation out into the open, that's doing your shadow work. And I think that's like a really important aspect of human evolution right now. And like coming to realize that all of these, and it definitely plays into, I think, like a lot of the feminine suppression that has been happening historically. And so I think that's like a way of empowerment, is be like not ashamed of any of that. And yeah, shadow work's super important. And let's see, where am I going next? So, and I think that also, of course, the image of mycelium is really powerful parallel with fairies, because like as we were talking earlier, we can have like very different myceliums coming together at this like beautiful junction, and like then suddenly like they have fungi have like the weirdest like sexual natures. Like they're so strange, and it's like not conventional. There's no like, we can't even really understand it that much. Like there's so much research being done, and we still like, you know, there's like thousands of mating types, which is like what is going on there? But yeah, having this image of the mycelium, like it's underlying everything. It's all kind of like this underlying structure for everything, and that's the fairy realm. It's like right there, and it's, we don't see it necessarily physically, but it's underlying everything, always there. And like it's totally cool with being in the shadows and not being acknowledged, because it still has its power. Like that's not taken away from either side of like from the fungi or the fairies. Like but if you do start to acknowledge it, then you connect to that power. And the way that fairies exist so energetically, it's like that mycelium like coming together and coming apart. And so one of my favorite like parts about mycelium is the Spitzenkörper tip. It's so fun. It's like, that's the growing tip of the mycelium there. And so it's like this complex chemical interaction that's like always going on. It's like, I don't know, people describe it as like out of phase. So there's really no way for us to characterize it like chemically or scientifically, really. We just know that it's there, but it's like always interacting with, it's like ready for anything. And it's the way the mycelium grows and interacts with its environment. But it's out of phase. It's like not necessarily like physically there, but it's like, it's kind of just this like constant transitional thing that's happening. And I think fairies really like to exist in that realm, like slightly out of phase. They're still there, they're still like kind of pushing things around and like having this influence, but they're just like just out of reach. And I mean, you can connect to it certainly, but yeah. And I also want to, I have no idea what time it is right now. 12:30? Okay, that's like about the extent of my workshop, but I'm totally down to keep talking. And I don't know. I also just wanted to, like, this is my last really important point, and then we can like talk about anything, but I'm having a really strong mission in my life right now to reconnect to Amanita muscaria, and that mushroom has had such cultural power and significance in our conscious evolution, and it's certainly a fairy mushroom. It's like you always see images, and how can you not? You see this big red mushroom with like white dots on it, like it's so playful and like really gorgeous and like enticing, and but also like very demanding of respect, and it's the compound in it, muscimol, is so people have really lost touch with its psychedelic experience. I definitely know people who are Amanita people, but I think that people are so much more connected in general to psilocybin and other psychedelics, and it's kind of like, I don't know, I guess it's just like this cycle of like that we're coming back to things right now, but we did like really lose this relationship for a while, and it's like kind of sad, but it's like people like, you hear a lot of encounters of bad trips with Amanita, and like people getting really physically sick and that sort of thing, and it's just like really intense, and there's not tons of, I hear a lot of negative connotation with it, and I've never ever experienced anything like that, but I guess it's just like not understanding what you're connecting to, and it's really important to establish that understanding, otherwise you are going to get really screwed over. Like, that's the same thing with fairies, like it's a different existence, a different consciousness, and if you're not like taking the time to at least try, like it's really gonna hurt, but if you do, then it's like one of the most productive things ever. And so muscimol is like the main psychedelic compound in there, and there's other alkaloids that I think play an important role as well, but I don't know, we're still having like a lot of scientific research on it too. We still don't have like complete explanation of the experience. I don't know if we ever will, but it's often described as a dissociative, and that's also something that people sometimes have negative connotation with, and I don't think that it needs to be that way. And it's not dissociation from like your reality or from yourself or anything like that, but in my experience with it, it is a dissociation from like really physical constraints, because dissociatives often are like kind of severing this brainstem connection right here, like with your spine to your brain, so that you're able to come out of this like physical, like your physical consciousness here, and you're able to like pull, like kind of get jerked out of it almost. You can take lower doses and it's pretty gentle, but if you really like want to delve in and take a higher dose, sometimes it is like a yank, and I think that dissociation can be so productive. It's a lot and disorienting and stuff, but it's putting you, like, it's very energetic and it's very introspective, but it's also putting you in a space that's like a little bit unfamiliar, because you're not so bound to this physical reality, and I think that that's something that we have lost in our like healing path and stuff like that. So having that tool there to be able to just go straight into the energetic realms, and like, I don't know, you have to be really vulnerable, be like really honest, and so I think it's a really powerful tool. I'm trying to facilitate a lot of reconnection with it, and if you are interested in like having that experience, I have a lot of resources for it. It grows freaking abundantly throughout the world, so it's like, it's really wanting us to be connected again with it. And yeah, don't be afraid of the physical illness. If you dehydrate it doesn't really make you that sick. If you eat it fresh, it does, but I think that can also be a tool, that purge, you know? And there's also lots of different preparations. I've been talking to a lot of really amazing people who are playing around with some like alchemical elements of it, and like different like energetic extractions, chemical extractions, that sort of thing. I have some things going right now as well, so that's like something that I'm really passionate about facilitating that reconnection too. So if you are interested in Amanita muscaria, I have tons of them and tons of resources for them too. So yeah, I think that's like a pretty good little area to close this journey on. I do want to share that I have a few things that I've made and cultivated here that are infused with fairy energy. So if you guys are interested in any of them, I would love to like do any sort of trades or anything like that. I've got some usnea extract, because usnea is usnea extract. Usnea is a lichen. It grows pretty abundantly in the southeast US, but it's also like, it's a lichen, so we can't cultivate it or anything, so it's like the harvest of it and stuff is, you need to be careful with it, but it's, you know, a symbiotic relationship of bacteria, fungi, and algae, and I think that really, like, that nature of it is so, it's just like, it's amazing, and I think that it has a lot of fairy energy in it, because it's like these really powerful, tiny little microscopic beings that are like creating this one really powerful organism. So yeah, it's really, this was made on the winter solstice last December, Sagittarius winter solstice. I'm Sagittarius, so this is like, I feel really connected to this extract particularly. It focuses on vagus nerve, solar plexus. It's super antimicrobial, so like any sort of infection fighting, that sort of thing, and also abundance. That's that guy. It's made in, what did I make that? I made it in Everclear, so it is an alcohol extract. I also have some little lotion bars that I made that are infused with chanterelles and safflower, rose, and they have shea butter and beeswax and a little bit of lavender essential oil. I have spore prints for Philosophy glendoi. If you know that species, it's a truffle or sclerotia producer, magic truffles. So they're like, the spore prints are pretty rare because they don't like to fruit their mushrooms very much. So I'm trying to spread its genetics around a lot because
I'll take some off your hands.
Oh yes, definitely. And they're so fun to grow, like the sclerotias. You basically, like, whatever container you inoculated, you just let it over-pollinize and it forms these, they're like, kind of like little knobby nuts or something. And yeah, totally, like walnuts, they kind of have that texture too. And it just grows in the mycelium, and those have psilocybin in them. And then you can also fruit the mushrooms from it, which also have psilocybin. So it's like it's a very generous. It likes to grow. It likes to fruit outside. The sclerotias will grow like in a bag or a jar or whatever, but it likes to fruit outside. So yeah, I have those guys. And then if you guys would like to pass around, or you can find me later. This is the philosophy glendoi itself. So this is here for some microdosing connection to happen. So yes, I can pass this guy around. And you guys can take a little nibble, whatever you feel, or find me later, and I will have them. So yes, that was. This kind of topic has like so much to it, but I hope I like brought you guys to a little like more connection to the faith. And if you have any questions or just want to talk more about any of this, my name is Christian Marr, but you can also, I have a website, it's Amanita, AUMANITA.
Do you have cards?
I don't have any cards, sadly.
I can write down my
May
website.
I,
Or to
may
say
I
it again?
add something
Yeah,
about
please
shadow?
do. Oh, I would love for that.
So, in the spirit of healing, the way mushrooms do,
Yes.
just a few pointers around what you offered. So shadow, everybody knows, is when you avoid a part of yourself. You don't want to feel jealous, you don't want to feel angry, you know. So the first move is to accept the feeling, sit with it, and there are ways of facilitating it going all the way through you. I once had an experience of it feeling a pop at the top of my head, allowing the feeling of grief to go all the way through and then pop, the way it happens in Vipassana meditation, which is what I experiment with. And then when we all have dark thoughts, like angry, jealous, embarrassment, shame-based stuff, so it's a thought form. So you let the feelings go all the way through without thinking, without changing, without getting busy, without doing anything. But in the dark thoughts coming up, there's a critical window of opportunity of choice about when you allow the dark thought to persist. And so people get anxiety and depression and many others build when we allow the dark thought to continue and feed it. So we have a moment when we can choose not to feed the dark thought. But when it crosses over an invisible line into rumination, then you start sliding down, and in the mind-body loop, the feeling and the thoughts start taking you into depression, anxiety, whatever. So there's a beginning point where we can train ourselves to heal by mindfulness, of course, here it is again. John wants to get angry at the guy who cut him off. He's looking for the tire iron to go fight. And then you gotta look, witness it in the tradition of spiritual witness. Look, John, you want to stay angry or you want your peace back? So that's a tiny example of how the first few seconds, minute maybe, we do have a choice to not let it ruminate, as it were. And I have a feeling that chemical substances that I'm not familiar with at all might facilitate the sequencing and the timing and the way emotion works. It goes in vitality curves. They rise, they escalate in a vitality curve, and then they hit and go one way into big ego reaction, jealousy, you go kill somebody, or you can train yourself to be aware of when it's moving, and then the traditional methods of prayer, meditation, chanting, ceremony help move it in the other direction from the ego reaction. So that's the kind of experimentation that I do. Thought it might help about shadow, and we can talk later if you like, if you want to expand the stuff on shadow. A lot of us are shadow workers, so we help facilitate it out of the psyche.
Yes, I would love to.
Could you spell your website, please?
It's AUMANITA.
And then what?
.com. Sorry.
That's it?
Yes.
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, you're going to text me,
guys.
good, or email me.
Do you recommend certain books or blogs or podcasts?
Yeah, certainly. And thank you so much.
Can you pass them around?
Yeah, totally. This book, some of you guys might be familiar with it, is by Robert Rogers. He's amazing, and so this is like really awesome for shadow work kind of stuff and using mushrooms as a tool for
Is he
that.
the British person?
He's from Canada. Yeah, I
I
think.
think Alex Doris was talking about him.
Oh, really?
Somebody recommended.
Did you pass them around?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll pass that guy. This is a book that I came across pretty recently, and it's like really, really interesting. It's talking about it's so cool. It's so cool. I just got it like a couple months ago. It's like this book is just really interesting. It's this is actually not his original writing. It's like kind of hard to find his like actual original text, I think. But this is someone's like summary interpretation of it. He was a priest, pastor, I don't know what his proper term, in like the 1800s? 1600s. And he has a very deep relationship with the Faeries, so he's a great teacher. So Robert Kirk, if you guys are interested in connecting to fairies more, that guy's really good. This is a more recent author, but I really like her a lot. Emily Carding, do you know her? This is like, I think this book came out just like maybe like 3-5 years ago. It's pretty recent, but she like does a pretty good job at like talking about more recent history of this interaction, spiritual connection, and then she works with the septagram a lot, and then she goes through like a lot of like each point of the septagram and like the elements that it's associated with, and just kind of, yeah, I don't know, a lot of like logistical kind of like tools, that sort of a thing, for fairy work, fairy craft. I don't know. Of course I have radical mycology because Peter is. Are you guys all familiar with this? Okay, well, you definitely should.
That's the big one.
That's the big one.
Get on that.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll take you a good part of a decade to read it,
It
though.
will.
Oh, wow.
It's
super packed.
It's packed, but yeah, Peter's really interesting, dude. This book is amazing, though. He has like from everything from like just, you know, like really like straight cultivation science to like just like everything you can think of. He has a really good section on fungi alchemy in here, which I like a lot. Just a lot of people don't touch on that. Just like some fun like mycelial meditations and games and like pretty much everything you can think of. Different like medicinal preparations. He has an organization based out of Oregon too, and he does a lot of like really, he teaches but also like really like active research and stuff like that. And he just announced the Radical Mycology Convergence, which is a big festival that he is holding in Oregon. I think, I forget when. October 14th.
Like it's mid-October.
This year?
Yeah. This year. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I applied to teach there. So.
And also,
I don't know yet. I think I might fly because that's kind of a dream. But
You wanna go?
yeah.
And then I have that friend in Oregon who keeps telling me I should go visit them so we can mushroom hunt.
Should do it.
Do you know where in Oregon? Is it Portland?
Portland, yeah, is where he's based out of. I haven't actually ever been to Oregon, so I
Maybe
don't
this is
know.
the same.
I think that isn't the convergence supposed to be in like Ukraine or something?
It might be.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's way downstate, Eugene.
Okay.
So
I
it's
don't
different.
remember.
Yeah, I can't. He has a website for it, for the convergence, so it has like all the details on there.
Yeah, the university's one.
there's
Yeah.
still like 2 weeks left if anybody wants to present there.
Yes, and he's putting out for artists too,
Artists,
and everything.
culinary
so.
people,
Yes.
all sorts of stuff. So
Yes.
it's pretty inclusive.
He is a freaking badass. I love him. He's amazing. Like, seriously. Another like
Favorite kind of people.
exactly. He's like so funny. It's so, oh my
There's
god.
several badasses here this weekend.
Oh yeah. Seriously. though.
Right in the tent.
On the like same note of Peter McCoy, there's also Trad Cotter, if you guys are familiar with him. He's also kind of like, he's not, I don't know. I work with Trad. I love Trad. He has Mushroom Mountain in South Carolina. But so he has a book out on microremediation and that sort of thing. And he's definitely he is chaos energy. That's just like what he is. And so he's like very he's very powerful, but a lot of his stuff that you find out there is more like scientifically based. But I don't know, it's my relationship with him is like so crazy. But he's Mushroom Mountain. Trad Cotter is also a great resource. This is another fairy book that I have that's really nice. But this is like very focused on Celtic history. But I like it a lot too. It's like really talking about like evolution of like deities and yeah, this is and like the really ancient history of Ireland and Scotland and that sort of a thing. So it's a good one, and I think that kind of work is important for spiritual work, like connecting to the history of it.
Can I see that one?
Oh yes. There's a second book out from that lady too. It's really good. Yeah. So yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I'm so happy you guys are here.
I assume this is why fairies are usually artistically displayed under mushrooms or on top of mushrooms.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair too. I didn't give you a talk.
Oh, nice.
It's called Traversing the National Grounds.
Beautiful artwork. What's this written?
Yeah, I think that was published like in the 90s or so. So it's been out for a while, but
Golden Goose. Oops.
Robert Rogers.
Stealing your books.
How are you? It's cool. They all come back to me. Robert Rogers.
That's right. That's
Go
the
back
attitude.
around.
They do. That's how things work.
You got it. Yes.
He has also another book out called Fungal Pharmacy. That's like oh yeah, it's him.
Yeah,
Isn't that crazy?
This
He's
is-
amazing. I really want to go study with him.
You should.
I really that's gonna happen.
Where is he?
Is that,
He's
that's
in
not his.
Calgary,
Yeah, no, but
Canada.
that's,
So kind of like up there. Yeah, but I
Yeah,
think it's worth it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's
It's
is
gonna
that
happen.
Rogers or Roberts?
Robert Rogers.
Rob.
Yeah,
That's right.
exactly.